Hi everyone, Steph here from the Novelty Corner and welcome back to my channel. Today I have a books beside my bed video for you. For anyone who is new here, I film one of these every week where I wrap up the last 7 days worth of reading. And for anyone who is very familiar with the series, welcome back. This is my reading week from the 18th until the 24th of October. I read a total of 7 books this week. Those 7 books equated to 1,755 pages and my yearly reading total is up to 238 books. I read 2 picture books, 1 novella and 4 novels. Picture books are obviously kids' books. 1 novel was a YA book, the novella was an adult romance, and then everything else was a mix of random genres in the adult sphere of reading. So let's dive into the books. I read Pandemic, written by Jackie French, illustrated by Bruce Watley. This is a 2020 release from Scholastic. It was a review copy that they sent to me. This is not about COVID, it is about the Spanish flu. And Jackie French is a very well-known, well-loved Australian author. Jackie French wrote this book based on the stories that her grandmother told her about growing up during the Spanish flu pandemic. And it is beautifully illustrated in watercolors, and there's a little note from Bruce Watley at the back saying that he actually illustrated this while in lockdown this year. So he had very limited materials to work with when illustrating the book. So he used a ballpoint pen and limited watercolors. And you get a really beautiful set of illustrations as part of this. And this is really the story of how families survived during the Spanish flu and how the community worked together to support those people who were in lockdown. So it is a gorgeous little book. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I'll be taking this into work. I think that this is perfect for older children. And I know that a couple of my fellow staff members who work in the senior school would be very interested in using this to talk about the current situation, referring back to a historical situation as well with their students. I also read Macca and Al Super Pals, which again was a review copy from Scholastic. This is a 2020 release. I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. I just kind of love the Macca the Alpaca series, and this is the latest release in that series. Macca and Al are best friends and they absolutely adore superheroes. I can relate. This time they decide that they want to become superheroes. So they find some capes, some masks, some underwear to wear on the outside, and they set off trying to save their friends from all sorts of situations until they unfortunately become stuck in a situation of their own and they learn all about the importance of teamwork. It is a beautiful, fun, entertaining story. It is full of humour and kids will love it. The young adult book I read this week was The Beautiful by Renee, Ahdieh, and I've heard a lot of people talking about it in the last couple of weeks. This is a young adult historical paranormal story. It does feature vampires, and I remember when this was initially released in 2019 that people were so eager because it was meant to be a vampire book, but then it wasn't vampire enough for them. That was sort of the thing that I heard. I kind of disagree with them, and I'll talk about why in a minute. This is set in 1872 in New Orleans when Celine Rousseau has travelled across the world to New Orleans to escape her past, where she has committed a murder. When she arrives in New Orleans, she's taken in by the scenery, by the people, by the sights and sounds, and then she stumbles across a friendship with someone that leads her to a mysterious, exclusive club. And she's not entirely convinced that everyone who is in this club is human. Then suddenly bodies start turning up around Celine and she starts to unpick some of these myths around paranormal creatures. We begin to see where the vampire myth fits into this. I think what people were disappointed by was the fact that vampires weren't blatantly involved in the story. However, there's no less than 4 gruesome murders in this book for a YA book. They're quite bloody. There's all sorts of characters who behave in the way of vampires, but not necessarily in what we have recently commercially seen to be vampires. So there's kind of a hierarchy and all sorts of things going on. And it was great. I really enjoyed it. I love books set in New Orleans. I love vampire stories. I don't really care how the author chooses to interpret the myth. I think if they choose to take it in their own direction, I think that's great. I really, really enjoyed this, and I would probably be interested in continuing the series at some point. I will say this book does leave off on a cliffhanger, so be aware of that going into it. But yes, it would be something that I would enjoy continuing. I also read The Two Lost Mountains by Matthew Reilly. This is the latest book in the Jack West Jr. series. It is a 2020 release. I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars. I have complicated feelings about this book because I adore Matthew Reilly. I will read anything Matthew Reilly puts out because I enjoy how fast-paced his books are. I always have. I've been reading his books for 19 years and I will continue to read them. On the flip side, he makes some choice decisions and sometimes I don't know what he's thinking, and also he is really terrible at writing women. I can't believe I would say this, but I would quite happily accept any of his books with just purely male protagonists and I'd be fine. Obviously, being book 6 in a series, it is very hard to talk about the plot of this. However, briefly summarised, Jack West Jr. is shattered by what he thinks has happened to his adopted daughter Lily. All of this took place at the end of the 5th book. He has regrouped with his friends and they are determined to stop their enemies from performing something called the Fall, which is a mysterious feat that will grant them unlimited power. Jack and his team are desperate to stop this from happening. It's everything that has been going on from probably book 3 or book 4. We get new characters in this book and some of them are really fantastic. We get some old characters. I adore the Black Knight and all of the side characters. They are pretty violent. They're definitely action-packed. But yes, I just wish Matthew Reilly could learn to write a female character with some decency, because that would be great, because he has really fantastic potential, awesome female characters in all of his books and he squanders them. I also read The Silent Wife by Karin, which is book 10 in the Will Trent series. No, I have not read any of the other Will Trent books. This book was picked for book club, so I read it, but you can definitely read without having read any of the other books. I'm sure I've probably missed 100 million little side clues and things like that, but I enjoyed it perfectly fine. I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars. It is a 2020 release. The story opens with a young woman who has had a really bad morning and has gone off for a run in the very early hours of the day and is found murdered in the woods. We then skip forward 10 years later and Will Trent and his partner at the GBI are out to one of the local prisons to investigate the death during a prison riot, and suddenly they get information about this case. Then another body is found and the MO for the murder is exactly the same as this murder that took place 10 years ago, despite the fact that someone was sentenced and put in jail for committing the crime. So Will and his partner reopen the case along with his romantic partner Sarah Linton, and they reopen the case and they try and find out the truth behind who committed these crimes. This book has a lot of trigger warnings. Obviously there's a lot of murder, there is a lot of violence, there is rape and significant violence towards women, so be aware of that going into it. I really enjoyed the story. I felt like in this book we got a lot of people's backgrounds, but it felt like Will's story was probably the lightest, which makes sense if this is 10 books in and the whole series has been about him. You also get the story told in flashbacks between the current day and the original investigation 10 years earlier, and the things that were done right and the things that were done wrong. So I found it really interesting, and I would definitely be interested in going back to read the earlier Will Trent books. I don't know when that will happen, but it's something that's on my radar. My ridiculous read for the week was courtesy of Izzy from Happy for Now, and that was Smashing the Pumpkin King by Ween, which is a short story. Actually, this wasn't a novella, this was a short story, so I apologise for the start of the video when I said that I read a novella. I didn't. I read a 26-page short story that was basically Halloween erotic romance, and it featured a jack-o'-lantern shifter. I can't really say anything else other than that because that's basically the story. And in all honesty, I've not laughed so hard while reading a story in months, so this was definitely a much needed break. And then finally I read Baptism of Fire by Andrzej Sapkowski. This is the 3rd novel in the Witcher saga, but the 5th book overall that I've read. All of these books pick up where the previous one has left off. So at the end of the previous book, Geralt had been injured, the Wizards Guild was in disarray, and we return to the story as everyone's sort of starting to pick up the pieces from what happened. Geralt is recovering in the Brokilon forests, and then he finds out that Ciri has been entered into a engagement with the Nilfgaardian ruler. I struggle with remembering the names of all the characters and the names of all the places in this series. I just follow along and my brain is sort of keeping track of where everything is, but I can't remember the tiny little details afterwards because there's a lot that's going on. Geralt sets out to rescue Ciri and he is accompanied by Dandelion and also a collection of new allies, and he has to learn how to deal with people who want to help him. And that is the main crux of Geralt's story in this, is accepting that he can't do everything on his own. We also continue Yennefer's story and we find out what happened to her post book 2. This felt like one long road trip through a war-torn country for pretty much the entirety of the book, but it was still highly enjoyable. There's a lot of really great conversation that takes place between all of the characters, and I think that's probably the greatest strength of the series, is the dialogue between all of the characters. And also we get a vampire in this book, so this was perfect for reading for October. But I do need to continue to read the rest of the series in November and December because it is part of my book haul revisited, which you'll see later in the week. So those are all the books that I have read this week. In the comments below, let me know if you have read any of these books or if you're planning on reading them in the future. I would love to hear. Alternatively, feel free to let me know what you have been reading. I hope that wherever you are in the world, you are staying safe and healthy, and I will see you all very soon in my next video. Thanks so much for watching. Bye everyone.